Welcome to our tour. You will be led today by 4 tour guides: Katie Tuck, Zoe Fageron, Michelle Landry, and Lynn Robinson. Though we are separated by geographical distance, 2 of us are students at the University of Arizona and 2 of us are students at the University of Texas at Austin, we are all connected by the belief that art has the power to tell stories we can all relate to and invoke a feeling of universal relatability. Today we'll be investigating how artists use their practices to explore personal narratives. Our tour hopes to explore how 4 different artists, using an array of different media, make their personal stories universally relatable and visually impactful. How do artists create connections between their personal experiences and stories, and what storytelling techniques do they employ? My name is Katie Tuck, and I will be leading us on the first stop of our tour. This first artwork is entitled Daughters of Wounds and Relics, and was created by the artist Dario Robleto. It is currently on display at the Blanton Museum of Art, located on the University of Texas at Austin campus. Take a moment to observe the artwork, pausing the video if you need time to close look. What do you notice? Can you identify the materials used in the creation of this piece? Does it remind you of a time period, a memory, or a person? In a word, what feeling or emotion is brought up in you upon viewing it? Robleto explores themes of loss and trauma, especially as they relate to the personal narratives of soldiers returning home or not returning home from war. His work is about personal art making and creativity as a form of survival in the face of loss. He mimics the style of the Victorian mourning arts, handicrafts, often created by widows or family members, which memorialize the soldiers that did not return home, and incorporates real personal mementos from this period, such as locks of hair and letters. In a way, Robleto performs a kind of alchemic transformation of primary materials that imbue his work with an erratic and reverent quality, indicating the artist's underlying belief in the power of art to heal. The medium label on this particular work, Daughters of Wounds and Relics, reads as follows: hair braid made of stretched and curled audio tape recordings of the last known Union Civil War soldier's voice and the last known Confederate Civil War widow's voice. Homemade paper, pulp made from sweetheart letters written by soldiers who did not return. This adds many layers of meanings to the work, but it is important to note that the label itself functions as its own narrative. In speaking on his artistic process, Robleto notes that he writes his medium lists before he creates the work, and that he carefully crafts these labels into narratives, a further connection to our tour's theme of storytelling through art. Working backwards in this way, Robleto transforms painful artifacts into something beautiful, performing a kind of posthumous transformation of the materials. This artwork is part of a larger body of work in which Robleto pays tribute to the soldiers. He talks of an imagined time-traveling soldier that moves from war to war to war. His is an exploration of the aesthetics of loss and the cathartic and transformative power of art making. How does knowing what materials were used in this piece change your relationship to the work? What feelings come up now? Why do you think the artist chose to integrate these particular materials? I invite you to participate in an activity keeping this idea in mind. The activity is called Alchemic Transformation Through Collage. You will need paper, some kind of writing utensil, scissors, and some kind of adhesive, such as tape or glue. Write a letter or make a drawing of someone or something that you miss. Then cut it up and reassemble it into a poem or collage, transforming the materials into something beautiful.
Thanks, Katie. My name is Zoe, and I'll be leading us on the second stop of our tour. Artist Dario Robleto's Daughters of Wounds and Relics taught us that art can be used as catharsis, to reflect on our emotions or our trauma and find healing by creating a personal narrative. The artist we will learn about next also contemplates lived experiences and emotions in order to process the daily ruminations that arise in our everyday lives. The artwork we'll be visiting features both three-dimensional sculpture and two-dimensional drawing. We will first begin with the sculpture. But before we learn any more about the artwork, let's take a moment to just look. Allow your eyes to wander across the screen, and I invite you to consider your first impressions. What might you notice about the shape of this sculpture? What do you think that it would feel like? Imagine you reach out to touch it. Does it move or does it make a noise? Here, you may pause the video and take as much time as you need to observe and jot down your thoughts. This type of sculpture is called a mobile. It was created by artist Beth Campbell. Campbell often draws artistic inspiration from nature or natural phenomenon. When I learned this, the sculpture began to remind me of seaweed, or perhaps a network of veins in a human body. Examine the sculpture once more. What else might the shape remind you of? Campbell calls this mobile a drawing in space. This description will become more clear as we turn our attention to the second part of this artwork. In the same room, situated directly across from the mobile, is a 2D drawing by Campbell. Let's take a look. Here, I invite you once again to note your first impressions of this drawing. Consider how you might describe this piece to a friend. Are there similarities that strike you between this artwork and the mobile? What differences do you see? Again, please feel free to pause here and gather your observations. This drawing is filled with lively, flowing markings. When we look closely, we begin to see that these marks are interconnected words and phrases. Almost like a bush growing from roots in the ground, they sprout from three different phrases at the bottom of the canvas. These read, "My friend opened a vintage store," "I need to buy a pillow," and "I sat on my brand new glasses while getting into the car." Campbell describes this drawing as a mind map, or the physical embodiment of a stream of consciousness. From seemingly mundane events in her daily life, the artist writes down possible outcomes, from the humorous to the tragic, allowing them to build upon one another. Almost like a personal diary, she allows her speculations to flow onto the paper. Have you ever used a journal or a list to help you sort out your thoughts and worries? At first, I thought that the mobile and the drawing could be considered as separate artworks. But then I learned that although there is much to appreciate about each in their own right, they are best understood as complementary to one another. Both the drawing and the mobile share the same title: Spontaneous Futures, Possible Past. As we remember that Campbell refers to her mobiles as drawings in space, we might notice the inverted structure of the mobile that becomes the three-dimensional form of her drawing. Both processes allow Campbell to tell a story. The artist explores her own narrative through both the physical manipulation of her mobiles and the handwritten flowcharts of her thoughts. I hope these artworks continue to help you explore personal narratives and the creative ways artists use to show them. This artwork is housed in UT Austin's Health Transformation Building of the Dell Medical School. I hope that you might get the chance to visit someday and see this artwork in person. Thank you, and on to the next stop.
The previous tour stop asked you to take a step back and think more deeply about the pieces that make up the whole. Here, we will think about the stories that may arise from paying attention to even the most minute details. Untitled by Carrie Mae Weems is a small 6x6-inch 1990 gelatin silver print of a woman turned away from the camera in front of a floral wallpaper. This black and white photograph is inset in a circular red and cream ornate plate. The woman's hair is natural, meaning undisturbed by chemical processing, and twisted atop her head into a crown. She wears dangling earrings, and while her face is not revealed, there is much to be captured by her centrality in the photo. Art, even in 2D, non-auditory forms, has an orality that lends itself to truly expressive storytelling. Carrie Mae Weems' works in photography create a collective awareness of being for underheard voices and underseen faces in public art spaces. Many critical conversations of her work are centered around her kitchen table series, a collection of photographs exploring the oft-overlooked power of African American women.
But I think also, of course, what happens is that this is sort of, I think, what it means to have sort of many different kinds of voices in primary institutions, that people begin to see themselves reflected in the work that exists within those spaces. And so it begins to underscore and to mark their own lives, that there is something that they relate to. They relate to themselves, they relate to a reflection of them.
Untitled comes at the tail end of the series and is seemingly a one-off piece bearing the same visually compelling mystery of its predecessors, the same depth of newness in consciously created spaces for new stories, those of African American women, full of self-worth, bodacious manner, varied talents, hard laughter, and multiple opinions in Weems' own words. Weems' practice explores personal narratives and modes of visual storytelling as a form of reckoning and self-exploration. We come to ask ourselves, as a result of Weems' work and process, how can storytelling help explore interrogation as a practice? How do we reconcile a constant repositioning of ourselves and ideas in relation to what is there and what is not? How do we make sense of our feelings when confronted with art that evokes a deeper engagement with ourselves?
That's why I think it's really important also to listen to others. To not only I come with my set of experiences to the work, but you as curator, as seer, as audience, you bring another set of ideas to the work that is equally as important. And it's in that space then that a dialogue actually happens and some learning takes place, that you help me to discover the breadth of me and I help you to discover.
Wendy Red Star's phenomenal series, 1880 Crow Peace Delegation, explores telling fuller stories and breaking from conventional thinking. The duality of the portrait and the red markings reveals new stories and reminds you of the fullness of the stories being told in all art forms. Annotate this photo, as Wendy Red Star did, and explore what is being said and what isn't. Ask yourself what the earrings might mean. Is she going to an event? Is this something she just wears every day that makes her feel special? Think about the floral wallpaper. Is she at her grandmother's house? Is she maybe turned away from someone she's arguing with? Maybe she's finding solace in what's going on in front of her. Take apart the pieces of this piece. Look over it. Dive deeper.
In our previous stop, we were intrigued by the mystery and secrets the image evoked. This method of a visual narrative leaves us to draw our own conclusions about the woman in the artwork. For our next stop, we will be learning about visual storytelling using a method known as rebus. I invite you to take a moment and focus closely on this artwork. The History of Her Life, written across her face by Margot Humphrey, is a color lithograph with metallic leaf and chine collé on paper. Chine collé is a printmaking technique in which the image is transferred onto a surface that is bonded onto a heavier support in the printing process. One purpose is to allow the printmaker to provide background color behind the image that is different from the surrounding backing sheet. The saying, "A picture is worth 1,000 words," comes to mind as we view this print by Margot Humphrey, which recounts her personal experiences as an African-American artist and woman. Humphrey was inspired by an image of a woman with a Sanskrit prayer tattooed in henna across her face, which she found in a National Geographic magazine. The History of Her Life, written across her face, is a bold and simplified self-portrait, overwritten with images, symbols, and script, which retell a personal narrative. Humphrey's life story is visually revealed across her face in the form of a rebus. A rebus is a code or reference where pictures, letters, or symbols represent certain words or phrases. During the Middle Ages, many families used rebuses to symbolize their family names or crest. In the modern age, rebuses are typically used as challenging riddles or puzzles. Rebus is derived from the Latin phrase non verbis sed rebus, meaning not by words, but by things. Rebuses can be found in ancient literature or can be inspired by popular literature. The more senses a piece of visual content is able to engage, the more memorable it becomes. And this character-driven visual story by Humphrey establishes a personal connection with the message being shared. The face of a woman with contradicting eyes stares directly forward with colorful illustrations contrasting against rich, dark skin. White, handwritten text intertwines with images to tell a visual story. The colors boldly stand out from the ink-black surface of her face. Her story is visually revealed across her face in a mixture of symbolic images and text. There is a deep range of emotions in the features illustrated and a deeper level of meaning reflected within the story. Many of the symbols Humphrey employs become part of a creed of her own personal pictorial language. As a whole, Humphrey's work is vibrant, almost cartoon-like, and communicates a youthful yet wise spirit. Her bold colors help create an energy that is both childlike and mature at the same time. Her color may be loud, but her subject matter is often intimate and telling, addressing a lifetime of emotions and experiences. Her addition of graphic patterns and bold colors to the subject matter creates visual interest while keeping the viewer engaged. The strength and vibrancy of this work gives the sense of her rising above hardship, a life well lived, and an unapologetic retelling of her story. Can you describe Margot Humphrey by looking at this artwork? Is it Margot Humphrey or someone else? And how would you know? How did the artist use rebuses in this work? Why do you think her eyes are two different colors? Different colors create different feelings or moods. What is your impression of the colors used in this portrait? You saw some words and images combined in the portrait. Can you tell me a story based on what you see? Today we will be creating a short rebus poem illustrating some aspect of your life. And as we said before, a rebus is a puzzle in which words are represented by combinations of pictures and individual letters to depict phrases. An example would be an image of a dragon, the letters FL, and the image of an eye, depicting dragonfly. So I invite you to reflect on this artwork, taking time to observe the many different images portrayed on her face. Draw one example from this image that uses rebus form. How would you write or illustrate your own personal story? What images might you use to create a rebus poem? Write or draw 3 phrases illustrating something about your life in rebus form. In conclusion, in Daughters of Wounds and Relics, we learned about the cathartic art-making process while working through personal emotions and trauma to create a personal narrative. In Campbell's ongoing series, entitled Potential Future Drawings, the artist creates flowchart diagrams of commonplace occurrences that happen in our everyday lives, which is much like that of a personal diary. Untitled by Carrie Mae Weems intrigues us through its mystery. Without knowing or seeing the face and expressions of this person, the viewer senses something, thus guessing at a narrative. The most obvious of visual narratives is represented in Margot Humphrey's The History of Her Life, written across her face. Through colorful images and combined text, we are able to sense the story of a life well lived. Some of the earliest evidence of human art suggest people told stories with pictures. We are connected through shared experiences, and as humans yearn to find meaning within our lives. This invites us to consider the ways in which our personal narratives may overlap and intertwine with those around us, creating meaning and shared connection. In what way can you use an art practice to create your own personal narrative?